Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Josh and you're watching Our History. Today we're going over the Battle of Majuba Hill on the 27th of February 1881 and was the final and decisive battle of the First Boer War that was a resounding victory for the Boers. So if you enjoyed this, please be sure to like, and if you're new here, consider smashing the subscribe button. If this isn't your first rodeo and you haven't shown some love to the subscribe, now is your opportunity. Thank you for watching. The Battle of Majuba Hill. The Battle of Majuba Hill, which took place on the 27th of February 1881, marked the final and decisive confrontation of the First Boer War. This battle resulted in a resounding victory for the Boer forces. The British Major General Sir George Pomeroy Colley strategically occupied the summit of Majuba Hill on the night of the 26th-27th February 1881. Colley's decision to occupy the hill may have stemmed from his concern that the Boers were on the verge of taking control of it for themselves. His observation of the Boers digging trenches in the direction of the hill likely fueled his anxiety. The Boers suspected that Colley, the British commander, was trying to outflank their positions at Laing's Neck. The Boers did not believe the hill was strategically important, as it was deemed impassable for military purposes. Thus, it is speculated that Colley's intent was to showcase British superiority and instill fear among the Boers. This battle is often regarded as one of the most disgraceful defeats endured by the British military. The battle. The British soldiers occupying the hill consisted of a total of 405 men. Among them, the largest contingent was of the 58th Regiment, with 171 soldiers spread across two companies. The 92nd Gordon Highlanders contributed to the occupation with 141 soldiers divided into three companies. A small naval brigade from HMS Dido also took part in the operation. Each soldier was equipped with 70 rounds of ammunition, a full water bottle, 3 days' rations, a waterproof sheet, and a greatcoat. Additionally, two companies of the 60th Rifles belonging to the King's Royal Rifle Corps remained on the slopes as pickets to protect the communication lines. General Colley made the decision not to bring artillery and to forego digging in on the summit despite advice from his subordinates. He believed that the Boers would retreat once they realized their position on the Neck was untenable. His men did bring along 4 picks and 6 shovels per company, but no digging was ordered. Additionally, a heliograph was brought to send signals to the camp. However, the Boers quickly organized a group of storming parties led by Nicolaas Smit, consisting of at least 450 volunteers from various commandos, to launch an attack on the hill. At daybreak, specifically at 4:30 am, the 92nd Highlanders had strategically positioned themselves around the summit, covering a wide perimeter. Additionally, a few soldiers from the Highlanders had occupied Gordon's Knoll on the right side of the summit, unbeknownst to the Boers. When the 92nd Gordon Highlanders began shouting and gesturing aggressively, the Boers suddenly became aware of the British troops' presence, causing them to panic, fearing an imminent artillery attack. In response, 3 separate groups of Boer soldiers, numbering between 100 to 200 men each, initiated a slow advance up the hill. These groups were led by Field Cornet Stephanus Ruas, Commandant D.J.K. Malan, and Commandant Joachim Ferreira. During the battle, the Boers, known for their superior marksmanship, strategically held their enemy on the slopes, allowing other groups to cross the open ground and to launch an attack on Gordon's Knoll. At 12:45, Ferreira's men unleashed a powerful barrage of fire on the exposed knoll, successfully capturing it. Boer General Piet Joubert later observed that while the battle was taking place at a distance of about 50 or 100 yards, the British rifles were sighted for ranges of 400 to 600 yards. This meant that the British troops were shooting downhill and firing over the heads of the exposed Boer attackers, as their officers had not instructed them to adjust their weapons' sights. During the Boer attack, Colley, the British commander, initially did not respond immediately to the advancing Boers until he was alerted by several subordinates about the severity of the situation. As the Boers advanced, they tactfully engaged the British from a distance, refusing close combat action. This allowed them to systematically pick off British soldiers one by one. The Boers had an advantage of the terrain, with scrub and high grass covering the hill, which the British were not trained to utilize. The lack of visibility and guidance from officers caused British discipline to crumble, resulting in panic and soldiers fleeing the battlefield. During the conflict, As additional Boer forces began to surround the hill, the British defensive line was unable to withstand the pressure, resulting in its collapse. Witnessing this, a significant number of British soldiers hastily retreated from the hill in a disorganized manner. Nonetheless, the Gordon's regiment demonstrated exceptional resolve and held their position for a prolonged period. However, when they were eventually overwhelmed and forced to withdraw, the outcome of the battle was now inevitable. At this point, the Boers successfully initiated an assault, exploiting the British line's already weakened state, which ultimately led to its complete fragmentation and defeat. Confusion and high casualties plagued the British force led by Colley, and in the midst of a fighting retreat, Colley was fatally shot by a Boer marksman, further adding to the chaos. The remaining British soldiers attempted to flee down the slopes, but were continuously targeted by Boer marksmen positioned on the summit. The 15th Hussars and 60th Rifles, who had come from Mount Prospect support base, executed a rearguard action, but it had minimal impact on the Boer forces. In total, approximately 285 British soldiers were either killed, captured, or wounded, including Captain Cornwallis Maud. During the Boer War, numerous wounded soldiers recounted their experiences of being surrounded by Boer soldiers. It is noteworthy to mention that a considerable portion of the Boer soldiers were young farm boys who were armed with rifles. The fact that these young, inexperienced fighters, led by a small number of older soldiers, managed to overcome professionally trained British soldiers had a substantial impact on Britain's prestige and negotiating position in the subsequent treaty that concluded the war. Aftermath. The Battle of Majuba Hill, which took place on the 27th of February 1881, may have involved a small number of participants, but it held great historical significance for several reasons. Firstly, it led to the signing of the Pretoria Convention and ultimately the end of the First Boer War, as it prompted the British to seek a peace treaty with the South African Republic. Secondly, the Boers' use of innovative fire and movement tactics, particularly by Commandant Nicholas Smith, demonstrated their advanced military strategies. Thirdly, the consecutive defeats suffered by the British at Majuba Hill, Laing's Neck and Skynshoogte made a lasting impression on the British psyche, creating a fearsome reputation for the Boers that persisted into the Second Boer War. The phrase "Remember Majuba" even became a rallying cry during this later conflict. The First Boer War, occurring from 1880 to 1881, has been viewed by some British historians as a turning point in the decline of the British Empire. Until then, Britain had consequently achieved decisive victories in conflicts and maintained control over its pre-war possessions. However, this war marked a significant departure from that pattern. For the time since the Revolutionary War, Britain was compelled to either recognize the independence of a pre-war possession or sign a treaty on unfavorable terms, resulting in the loss of a substantial amount of territory. The Majuba incident marked for the first time that Britain experienced defeat in the final stages of war due to their foreign policy of only negotiating from a position of strength. However, it is important to note that the First Boer War, which can be considered Britain's first clear-cut defeat since the American Revolution, went largely unnoticed by the general public. This was mainly because the original terms that ended the war spared Britain from much of the embarrassment of defeat. The 1881 Pretoria Convention established the British monarch as the head of state in the Transvaal, which was declared self-governing but under British suzerainty. This arrangement, however, was more of a legal fiction and was eventually revoked by the 1884 Pretoria Convention. Despite this, Britain could not officially claim to not have been defeated. Prior to the discovery of gold in the Transvaal in 1886, many believed the Transvaal Republic would not have a sustainable economy in the long run. The First Anglo-Boer War, although a brief and low-intensity conflict, did not have a significant impact on the foreign relations of the British Empire. At the time, emerging powers like the United States were already challenging British hegemony. The defeats suffered by Britain in this war can be seen as a temporary setback, as the empire continued to expand for several decades afterwards. Eventually, during the Second Boer War in 1899 to 1902, Britain recovered all the territory it had lost in 1881. Therefore, the First Anglo-Boer War had limited long-term consequences on the overall trajectory of the British Empire. If you made it this far, I hope you're really enjoying this channel, and if you'd like to support the creation of more content like this, because all contributions are greatly appreciated, consider joining the channel in the membership tab or check out the Patreon link in the description below.